Again, we'll be continuing our study through Luke 22, 63 through 71. But before we go there, we have to back up like we always do. And last week, we made our way through Luke 22, verses 54 through 65. And it's in those verses that Peter and John are following Jesus to the house of the high priest, that being Caiaphas. Now, why are they doing this? Jesus has just been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And as the officers closed in on him to bound his hands, what did the apostles do? They fled. They ran. So it's here in the dark of night, this massive army of men made up of the high priest, the Sanhedrin, Roman soldiers, and Jewish soldiers would be escorting Jesus back to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. And in doing so, Peter and John are lurking in the shadows so as not to be seen as they're following this massive army of men. So it's once this army of men come to the courtyard of the high priest that they enter through a gate. Now at this gate there will be two servant girls allowing people in. And by this time, once the massive crowd has entered into the courtyard, now they have taken Jesus into the house where they are going to try him. Now nothing about this is legal. There is no reason that they should be trying Jesus in the dark of night. The Mishnah speaks against that. And yet here they are doing that very thing. So once they get Jesus inside the house, and you still have a massive army of people gathered in the courtyard. They have a fire going, it's cold, and it's dark. And it's here that Peter and John finally make their way to the courtyard entrance. Now, John knows the high priest, and because he knows the high priest, he's able to speak to one of the servant girls to get Peter in. So John and Peter make their way into the courtyard, and then here's Peter, hood up, head down, trying to blend in with the crowd. Peter sits by the fire. And as the light of the fire keeps flickering on his face, the servant girl is now staring at Peter. And remember, he's surrounded by a bunch of men, the very men who arrested Jesus. And it's then the servant girl cries out loud, "Hey, he was with Jesus." And what does Peter do? "Woman, you don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't with Jesus. Well, what are you saying?" So it's then that Peter gets up, drags himself away from the fire, kind of dips into the shadows, lets the conversation die down. And it's then he thinks, okay, I'm going to be able to make a break for the courtyard gate now. And in doing so, what happened? Hey, this is the man that was with Jesus. He was following Jesus. He's one of his disciples. And Peter cries out, "Man, I'm not him." Now what is this, church? This is 2 denials so far. And what was it that Jesus said would take place? That Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows. So you see the courtyard gate is in front of Peter, but he can't make it to it because now people are starting to gather around him again asking, "Are you that guy? Are you that guy?" So Peter backs off once again into the shadows, hoping that no one will notice him. And it's then that he is spotted for the 3rd time. And this time, it's a little different. Because this man was a witness in the Garden of Gethsemane when Peter was arrested. And it's this man who says, yeah, you were with Jesus. Matter of fact, not only were you with Jesus, but you, Peter, cut off my relative's ear. Yeah, that servant's ear that you lopped off, we're related. So now you have a man that is calling him out, a true eyewitness. And it's here for the third time that Peter denies Jesus. And what happens while Peter is denying him? What is that noise that comes from the distance? It's a rooster crowing. But not only does he hear that rooster crowing, but at the same time, Peter's denying Jesus. Jesus is being led through the courtyard to another house to be tried in. And it's then that Peter and Jesus make eye contact. But Jesus doesn't look the same. Jesus has been beaten. There would be blood coming from his nose, bruises starting to swell up underneath his eyes, and there's man's spit dangling from his beard. His hands are bound, walking through the courtyard. A rooster crows. Peter denies. Eye contact is made. And it's then, church, that Peter is reminded of what Jesus prophesied, that he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows. It's at this moment that Peter is crushed. The burden of his sins are weighing upon him. So he's finally able to make it to that courtyard gate. And as he walks out, he breaks down. His sins have just crushed him. It's here. Peter repents. And it's here that we see God's grace and mercy forgiving him. But God does something else. After Jesus is resurrected, Jesus finds Peter. And he has Peter tell him 3 times that he loves him. God didn't have to forgive Peter. Jesus didn't have to forgive Peter. But this is the God we serve, the holy triune God who forgives the wicked. And hear me, if you are a believer in here today, that's exactly what he has done for you. He has forgiven you, O wicked person. Now, back to this trial. Luke doesn't give us a whole lot of information. Luke's the kind of guy that gets straight to the point. I like Luke. Just blunt. Let's do this thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this in just a little bit to give these upcoming verses some context. And this context is going to be coming from other Gospels that gave us a little bit more information. Now, again, I stated earlier that this trial that Jesus was going through was not legal. It was being held by the Sanhedrin. That is the Jewish court system. Think of the Sanhedrin like our Supreme Court, if you will. Yes, religious leaders, this was a theocracy, but they were also the governing body. Now, R.C. Sproul says it best, and why should I try and put it in my own words when I can just take his? He describes the Sanhedrin this way. It was a council of 71 members that had supreme power over the Jewish faith and behavior within limits imposed by Rome. Tradition places the Sanhedrin in the body of 70 elders appointed by Moses. Now the Romans, they retained the authority to overrule any decision taken by the Sanhedrin, in particular, the right to impose the death penalty. Now this Sanhedrin group was dominated by the Sadducees. Now do you remember the Sadducees? The Sadducees were the liberals. They do not believe in an afterlife, nor do they believe in angels nor demons. That's why it's Sadducee, they believe that way. I need to quit with that. That joke is so bad. It just needs to be. Yeah, but this is the liberals that we are dealing with. That's the Sadducees, and they're the ones that primarily made up the body of the Sanhedrin. But there were also the Pharisees, and the Pharisees you would consider the conservatives. However, they too hated Jesus. And then we have the scribes, the lawyers. Now again, the Sanhedrin hated Jesus. They hated him so much that they were willing to break their own laws when it came to trying Jesus. They hated him so much they were going to break their legal tradition. Now, Darrell Bock does a tremendous job in his commentary on Luke, laying out the violations of the Sanhedrin concerning the trial of Jesus. Now, we all love court dramas, right? If you don't like them, just don't say anything. Just nod your head and keep going. You know, you can't handle the truth. But this is what we are dealing with here. This is a court drama unfolding right before our very eyes. And it's wicked and it's corrupt. Should relate to us today. But Darrell Bock, like I said earlier, he does a tremendous job laying out the violations of the Sanhedrin concerning this trial. Now what Darrell does, we're on a first name basis, what Darrell does is he quotes from the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is the first major written collection of the Jewish oral traditions known as the Oral Torah. It is also the first major work of rabbinic literature. So this was their laws. These are the laws that the Sanhedrin are supposed to follow, but they refuse to. Why? Because they want to condemn Jesus, and if they follow the laws, there's no way that they're going to be able to do that. I mean, it is just corrupt. So let's go through the violations. A, these are the laws that the Sanhedrin broke, remember. A, the proceedings took place at the high priest's home and not at the temple. B, Jesus was tried without a defense. The Mishnah says that both sides of the case must be heard. C, Jesus was accused of blasphemy without actually blaspheming in the technical sense of the term by pronouncing the divine name, and that was from the Mishnah as well. D, the verdict came in the space of one day when 2 days were required for a capital trial. E, Jesus was tried on a feast day, the Passover. Remember the meal they had just taken part in. F, contradictory testimony nullifies the evidence brought against Jesus. G, a pronouncement of guilt by the high priest is contrary to the normal order, which should start with the least senior members. So again, hear me when I'm saying that this trial is a farce. But it was a 6-step farce that started after midnight. So the first 3 trials, before the former high priest, so here's the way it goes. The first 3 trials work like this. The first one is going to be before the former high priest. Not the high priest, but the former high priest. Then the second step is going to be before the high priest. And finally, the third step before the full Sanhedrin. So even from the get-go, this thing should not be taking place. And then after the religious trials, we know about the 3 trials that will be before the Gentile leaders, Pontius Pilate and King Herod. Those would be considered the civil trials. Remember, because what the Jewish people are wanting to do is kill Jesus. But they don't have the authority to do so. So they have to take it before the Roman authority. So we understand that the Sanhedrin trial is filled with legal violations. But there's also personal corruption as well. The high priest, that being Caiaphas, was and is the son-in-law of the former high priest, which is Annas. Now, Annas was removed from the high priest position by Pontius Pilate. However, Annas was still the shot caller. So why does he hate Jesus? Well, maybe you guys remember this incident. Inside the temple courtyard, we know that they are money exchangers, right? Because they would only accept a certain type of coin when it comes to the offering. So they would have to exchange their money for this certain type of coin, and they would be charged extra for that coin exchange. That's what the money exchangers were doing. Then you have the animals that were to be sacrificed. See, a lot of the Jewish people would bring in their own animals, but as they're making way in, the priest would look at that animal and say, no, that animal's not going to work. You're going to have to go over to the animal sacrificing station over there and buy a new animal that we can sacrifice. And they would be charged more money for that. Where do you think this money was going? To the high priest. So what is it that Jesus does? He comes in and just wreaks havoc inside that place. He's turning tables over. He's made a whip. Sitting there going all over the place, just slamming that thing about. People are running around, screaming. He stopped it. So yeah, the high priest, the Sanhedrin, they're going to have an issue with this because this was part of their money coming in. So of course Annas is going to want him dead. Of course Caiaphas is going to want him dead. So that's the Sadducee side of the Sanhedrin there. Their corrupt ways. And then you have the Pharisees. Well, wait, we thought they're the conservatives, right? They would be the good guys. No. The conservatives also have an issue with Jesus. Why? Because they are the theological intelligentsia in the community. If you want to know something about the word, you go to a Pharisee. Now, he'll tell you how to live your life, even though he's not living that way. But that's who you go to. And what was it the Pharisees were trying to do to Jesus? They were trying to trip him up with any type of question. They would get together, have a brainstorming session. Okay, this is the one that's going to get him. Now, Daryl, it's not a good Pharisee name, but Daryl, we've come to this decision. This is the wonderful question that we've come up with. We're going to wait for Jesus to be in a public setting. And then, Daryl, you're going to be our spokesperson. You're going to go and ask Jesus that question. You're going to trip him up. And then this way we can sit back and say, see, this Jesus fellow isn't truly the Messiah we've been waiting for. But every time Daryl did that, not saying he was a spokesperson every time, but every time they asked him a question, what did Jesus do? He made them look stupid. He humiliated these intelligentsia in front of everyone. So their pride has been crushed. They want this man done away with. And it's really stupid if you think about it, right? Why in the world would you think that you could trip the word in the flesh? Why do you believe that you could trip him up by using the word? So, we can see how it is at the Sanhedrin, whether you're on the side of the Sadducees or the Pharisees and the lawyers. They were pretty much made up of the Pharisees. But you can see why they wanted to get rid of Jesus. Now let's head back to the trial, the first one that is. Now this first trial, when Jesus enters into the courtyard, they're going to take him before Annas. Now remember, Annas was the former high priest. He has no say in this. But this is the decision they make. Former high priest, the actual shot caller, is who he is going to be standing in front of. So what is his game plan? Annas is trying to get Jesus to incriminate himself. Why? Because Annas has no charges against Jesus. So he's trying to get Jesus to say something, anything, to incriminate himself, which is also against the Jewish law. How can you question someone without reason? So what does Jesus do? How does he respond to this line of questioning from Annas? It's quite beautiful, really. He asked Annas to go out and question those who have heard him teach. What's Jesus saying? Look, I've been doing this for 3 years. 3 years. If you think that I have done something wrong, surely you can go out and grab someone who has heard my message. You ask them what I have said. And it's at that moment a guard hits Jesus. Why? This guard was trying to gain the respect of Annas. And we're not certain how many times he was hit, but he was hit. Again, this is a violation of the law. And you can picture Jesus, hands bound. He's a peaceful man. He's never incited a riot. He never tried to start a revolution. No, he was a man who's proclaiming the truth, that he is the Messiah. So he answers this question, hands bound, and then bam, in the face. What could he do? Nothing. He took it. And not a single person stood up for Jesus at that moment. They were just trying to find a charge that would stick. Annas becomes frustrated. So he sends Jesus to stand before Caiaphas, the actual high priest. Now, what was Caiaphas doing? He was hurrying to get some of the Sanhedrin together because they weren't all there. And it's at this moment, we believe, is when Jesus is crossing through the courtyard and he makes eye contact with Peter. Now, this trial, again, at night, in the home of Caiaphas and not at the temple. So it's here that Caiaphas tries, just like Annas, to come up with a charge against Jesus. Again, they have nothing. No evidence, no eyewitnesses. So what do? They follow the same plan that they had to arrest Jesus. They bribed people. They brought in false witnesses. Now again, this would be the equivalent of our courts today, bringing in a false witness. Bringing in false witnesses to put an innocent man to death. And listen, when I say innocent, I'm not talking about not committing the crime that they're accusing him of, which they haven't yet. I'm talking about the sinless man. The God-man who never sinned. If you want to talk about an injustice in the world, this was it. But that didn't work. Because the eyewitnesses, their stories contradicted each other. Now still notice, no witnesses have been called for Jesus. So 2 hearings have gone by, and nothing. Caiaphas is becoming frustrated, and he asks Jesus to defend himself against the false witnesses. But Caiaphas knew that there was nothing there, but maybe if Jesus would just say something against the false witnesses, he would slip up and they could charge him. But Jesus remained silent. Now it's then that Caiaphas questions Jesus under oath on something that he had taught. Look at Matthew 26, 63 through 64. But Jesus remained silent, picking up right here. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now that's all Caiaphas needed to hear. And to show the Sanhedrin that was actually gathered there just how holy he is, Caiaphas tears his robe in disgust. He was so devastated that Jesus would make that claim, he couldn't even bear it. So it's here that Caiaphas charges Jesus with blasphemy. The irony here, though, is that it's not Jesus who is the blasphemer, but Caiaphas for denying the truth that poured from the lips of Jesus. And now the Sanhedrin that's there starts erupting. They're shouting out, now he deserves death. But notice, church, there was no official vote. The Sanhedrin just wanted blood. And now with the false charge of blasphemy, Jesus would be put to death after these two illegal trials at night without the full counsel of the Sanhedrin. But first, we have to go into the third religious trial. Let's pick this up. Luke 22, verse 63. Now the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. This is after the second trial. And to think that this is the high court of Israel. And here they are beating an innocent man. The religious elite striking the God-man. Now some of these men would hit him with an open hand while others with a closed fist. And not one person speaks up for Jesus. This is how they're treating the Savior, the religious elite. It's disgusting. But they didn't stop there. Look at verse 64. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, prophesy, who is it that struck you? Church, I'll say this again. Over the past 3 years, these very men have watched the sinless man. They have heard his powerful teachings. It was a truth like they have never heard before. They saw the miracles that he performed. I mean, he brought a man back from the dead. And just within the last couple of hours, he took a man's ear that was flopping on the ground. He picks it back up, puts it back on his head. Doesn't sew it, doesn't glue it. He miraculously heals it. And yet here they are, mocking him. And it may be with a slap across the face of Jesus. It could be a ring slicing into his flesh. And they'd ask, who did that, Jesus? Which one of us just slapped you across the face, Jesus? Or it may be that crushing blow to his nose with a fist? Who did that one, Jesus? Which person in the Sanhedrin just cracked you in the nose? The thing is that Jesus knew exactly who was hitting him, for they were just fulfilling the prophetic word of Isaiah. Isaiah 56 says, I gave my back to those who strike, and my cheeks to those who pull out the beard. I hid not my face from disgrace and spitting. Verse 65 says, and they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. It's absolutely amazing. And here they are, continuing to mock him. But we have to understand what is being said. Jesus is being charged with blasphemy. Again, a false charge. But it was they who were blaspheming him. They were cursing the Messiah, spitting on the Messiah, smacking the Messiah, and punching the Messiah. They had 3 years of evidence on who this man is that they are beating. And in that 3 years of time, Jesus had just about fulfilled every prophetic word of the Old Testament concerning the Messiah. I say just about because he hasn't met death yet. But he soon will, fulfilling the Old Testament prophecies. And if these are the religious elite, you would think that they would understand that, wouldn't you? But they don't. They don't recognize the truth because they can't hear it. Their hearts are hardened for this very moment in time. Now, we say this all the time, that there's not a single thing that is going to take place on this earth that God has not ordained before the foundation of the world. So did God ordain for this moment to take place? Yes, you better believe it. God ordained for his son to be murdered by these heathens. Well, then how can these men be at fault? How is it on the day of judgment when they stand before God, can they be found guilty? Because they wanted to do this. They weren't forced to. They wanted to kill Jesus. That's how they will be found guilty. So here it is, the question that has to be asked. How do you charge the sinless man? They've answered that question. You lie. You take the truth that he is the Messiah, and you use it against him. So we now head to the third religious trial of Jesus, that being the, picking up in verse 66. Notice what takes place here. In the very beginning, what does it say? When day came. Now, why is that important? For any of this to be official, the trial has to take place during the day. The decision has already been made. This is just make-believe. This is just a play so that they can say, yes, we charged Jesus with blasphemy in the light of day. He goes on to say, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council, and they said. So we can understand here, what is it that they're doing? They're just covering their tracks. First two trials were illegal. Now they're making it official. So they pull everyone together, all of the Sanhedrin, to make it appear as if Jesus was going to get a fair, impartial trial. And so the questioning begins. A question that has already been asked, church. But he's about to ask it again, just to make this hearing appear legitimate. Look at verse 67. If you are the Christ, so picture this. Here they are, the Sanhedrin. They're all there. Caiaphas leading. And here's Jesus, bloodied and bruised. Daylight is starting to pour in. If you are the Christ, tell us. But he, Jesus, said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe. See, he knows that they don't want the truth. Because one, they don't understand it. See, the religious leaders truly don't grasp the biblical understanding of the Messiah. They've relied upon their own man-made traditions when it comes to the Messiah. And what is that? That he is going to be an earthly ruler who is going to come, overthrow the Roman Empire, freeing the Jewish people from their oppressors. But that's not what the word says. However, the religious elite have added to the word. Their man-made traditions now trump the word. Jesus will answer that he is the Christ of Scripture, not the man-made king of just the Jews that they have falsely taught. Which is why he says to them, you will not believe. They've heard him preach. They've heard him describe himself as the Messiah using the Scripture. And it's not an earthly one. It is the true biblical one. See, Jesus wasn't there to free the Jewish people from their oppressors, but from something far more diabolical, their sins before God. That's why Jesus was there. Verse 68 says, and if I ask you, you will not answer. In the last few months of Jesus' ministry, he's been approached by many of the Sanhedrin publicly. And during those public interactions, he's asked them who they think he is. So you can see Jesus speaking to these men, the religious leaders, and he's asking them, who do you think I am? You've heard me preach. You saw me perform miracles. Who do you think I am? Has there been a single sermon that I have preached that has been against the word? No. If anything, what I have done is reveal the truth in a far more deeper level than you can comprehend. And during those interactions, when Jesus asked them, they would never answer. It's here Jesus answers their question again. And he answers by using the scripture from Daniel that doesn't speak of an earthly king, but of the true king. Look at verse 69. But from now on, Jesus speaking to this group of men, the powerful elitist, the Sanhedrin. But from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. But from now on, what does that mean? This is speaking on after his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. From that point on, meaning after you kill me, After I've resurrected, after I've ascended into heaven, I will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. See, he's proved his point once again, that the Messiah is not just an earthly king. It is far more than that. That's why he refers to himself as the Son of Man, not Messiah. No, he's saying, I am the Son of Man. Because the word Messiah, they've completely messed up. They've taken that word, hijacked it, and changed the definition. Still happening today, by the way. So Jesus doesn't use the word Messiah. He's not playing their game. He claims that he is the Son of Man. Jesus once again pointing out how wrong they are to believe, to be teaching that this Messiah is just an earthly king who is just for the Jewish people. Jesus is telling them that he is the king who will rescue his own, who will reign and will rule, sitting at the right of God. And sitting at the right hand isn't just a place, but it shows that he too has the power of God. So what is Jesus saying? That he is God. Now look at verse 70. So they all said, are you the Son of God then? Well, duh. That's what he just said. Time and time again, he has said this. And he said to them, you say that I am. He's turning this back around on them. Look, you're the one charging me with blasphemy, right? How am I blaspheming God? By stating that I am God. So yes, you have said it. And you don't even know that you've admitted the truth. They just refuse to believe it. And it's really quite sad. If you think about it, the God-man walked with them for 3 years. And they refused to believe it. They refuse the truth. Look at verse 71. Then they said, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. They rejected him once again. The worst part is that they are using the truth. That Jesus, yes, is the Messiah, and he's made that claim perfectly clear. And this is what they're using to condemn the Son of God. They've ignored his ministry. And listen to me, church, because this is extremely important. So stay with me, okay? We're coming to an end. I know your stomach's growling, but listen. Because they refused to believe, do you know what they did to themselves? They damned themselves. Here's the truth. No thanks, I don't want it. These very men are heading to a place of eternal torment. But that place isn't just for the Sanhedrin. It's for all of those who reject the God-man. It's for all of those who reject the Son of Man. Let that sink in. Ponder on that throughout the day. Because listen, there are those who claim Christ today, just like the Sanhedrin. They believed that there was one who was coming, but the truth was before them, and they didn't like that truth, even though they claimed Christ. But they hated his commands. They didn't want to believe that this was the one standing before them because they didn't like him. And this is what I'm saying. There are many today who claim Christ, claim to be believers, but they too hate his commands. They do not want to obey his words, but they claim Jesus all day long. You'll see them in church on Sundays and on Wednesdays. But their life says something different. They don't turn from the sins that disgust God. There are certain sins that they would rather live in because it makes them happy. And surely they serve a loving God that if they enjoy doing something, even though God despises it, surely God will forgive them for it. Not if they willingly continue to live in that sin. Church, following the commands of God will not save you because you can't do it perfectly. See, Christ did that for the elect. But I'll say this again, for those who claim Christ, they cannot live in open sin, meaning they cannot live a life that goes against the commands of God. For a true believer craves to be obedient to the word, not to willingly go against it. Let us pray.